What's up guys, welcome to the Chess Giant. This is Solomon Riddell, and in today's video we're going to be covering one of the most dynamic and flexible systems in all of chess with the King's Indian attack. And really what we're trying to do here with the white pieces is eventually get our central pawns to d3 and e4, put our knight pair on d2 and f3, fianchetto our light squared bishop, and castle kingside. And I know some of you may be wondering, what on earth is white doing? This may seem a little passive, however, white is fighting for the center of the board. With these central pawns, we are currently attacking the light squares, specifically c4, d5, and f5. Our knight on f3 attacks the dark squares in the sweet center of the board, and this knight on d2 primarily acts as a supporting piece for this central pawn on e4, and on top of that, defends the knight on f3. And this bishop on g2 may not look very active, but once things break open, can become a very active piece. Now guys, this isn't a system where we're trying to checkmate our opponent within the first 5 to 10 moves. By playing the King's Indian attack, we are playing the long game, and this isn't an opening like the Evans Gambit or the Sicilian Najdorf where we need to memorize hundreds upon hundreds of opening lines. Instead, there are a ton of main ideas and principles and strategies that we can use to give ourselves a good middle game position. Now keep in mind, black is not forced to play anything against this setup. However, no matter what black plays, the principles stay the same. There's actually a couple different ways of reaching this. The most traditional or quiet way of playing the King's Indian attack is with the move knight f3. We can also reach this setup after the move e4, which we'll go over later on in this video, but let's first cover the move knight f3. I mean, with this move, we could play moves like c4 next, d4, but as y'all will see, the very next move, really no matter what black plays, we're going to play g3, followed by fianchettoing our bishop, castle kingside, and then play the move d3. And notice here, guys, how I'm not really commentating on what black does. I mean, black just played c6, d5, and brought out two of their minor pieces, but at the end of the day, we don't really care what black does. Our moves stay the same. The only way this changes is if the black bishop takes our knight on f3, in which case we say thank you for the bishop pair. In this position in particular, we're going to continue with knight bd2, the very next move, and after a move like e5, play e4, fighting for the center of the board. Now guys, in a position like this, if black ever plays d takes e4, we're not going to take back with our knight, but with our d pawn. That is why we played d3, to support that e4 pawn, being able to capture back in a moment's notice and continue fighting for the light squares of the board. Now against an active move like bishop c5, we have the key idea in the King's Indian attack of h3. We see this move a ton, especially against bishop g4, which looks to pin our knight to our queen on d1, and now black does have a big decision to make. Black could take the knight on f3, but I don't think this is very good because it gives us the bishop pair at move 9, and on top of that, allows us to develop our queen and get a good grip of the light squares on the king side of the board. And a move like bishop e6 isn't very good because we simply play knight g5, picking that bishop off. So I think here the best option for black is simply bishop h5, in which case we have the somewhat strange looking move queen e1. This may look weird, but really what we're trying to do is two things. Now first off, we did escape the pin that the bishop on h5 had on our knight, and on top of that, we're really looking to support that e4 pawn, and by doing this, we're freeing up our knight on d2, and we're going to see this the very next move. I mean, following a move like castling kingside, we can play knight c4, both of our knights now attacking that centralized pawn on e5, and if a move like rook e8, we can always expand on the queen side of the board with a4. Against a move like queen c7, we can now play knight h4, and this is also a very strong strategic idea in the King's Indian attack. This move isn't always available, but it is quite a bit at the time, especially right now with a pawn on g3, a pawn on h3. Really the whole purpose of this is two-sided. Now first off, we are eyeing that f5 square, and on top of that, we have potential f4 ideas. Now obviously we can't play this right away because the bishop on c5 pins the pawn to our king, but eventually f4 ideas can be played, and it never hurts to have more stuff up our pocket. Now following a move like a5, trying to really solidify the position of the queen side, we can continue with the quiet move of bishop d2, forming a battery ram with the bishop and the queen, now actually threatening to just take the pawn off the board, so b6 is more or less forced. And against this, we can now play a move like king h1. Why on earth would we ever want to play a move like this? Really the whole purpose is to free up that pawn on f4. I mean, following a move like knight f8, we can now just push with f4, expanding on the king side of the board very aggressively, actually threatening to take the pawn on e5. So the best move here for black is taking that pawn, in which case we can now activate our bishop with bishop takes f4, attacking the opponent's queen. And if a move like queen d7, we now see our knight f5 idea come to fruition. Again, guys, knight h4 and knight f5 is a key idea that you can utilize in your King's Indian attack type of games. And right now, I mean, this knight is a very strong minor piece, really putting the pressure on black. And if black tries to get rid of it with a move like bishop g6, now this bishop no longer has vision of d1, and we can simply play rook d1. I mean, we're currently attacking the opponent's queen, and if you just look at the activity of white's pieces here, I mean, our rook on d1, our rook on f1, which is also on a semi-open file, both of our knights on c4 and f5 are very active. We have a strong bishop pair, and a queen on e1 that is really holding things together. The very next move, we have potential knight c d6 ideas, and this knight on f5 also eyes g7, which would really weaken the positioning of the king. White has a simply better game here. So that is one way to reach the King's Indian attack with knight f3, fianchetto the bishop, and castle kingside. However, surprisingly, we can also reach this with e4. And we can reach the King's Indian attack with e4 against openings such as the French, the Pirc, the Karl Khan, Sicilian. I mean, there's a ton of different systems here, even knight f6 with the Alekhines defense. I mean, let's just say black plays the French defense here. How on earth are we going to reach the King's Indian attack? Well, now we're going to play the move d3. And against d5, play knight d2. Again, this may look very passive, but this is just a very strong and solid position for white. If black ever takes the pawn on e4, we'll simply take back with the d pawn. I mean, if a move like knight f6, we're now going to play knight gf3, and after c5, continue with our g3, followed by bishop g2, and castling kingside idea. Now, I think one advantage of playing e4 is that really you can throw black's game plan off. I mean, if we play knight f3 right away, they kind of know what's coming. But if we play e4, they probably think that we're just a solid, normal e4 player, and they may play the French defense, the Sicilian defense, the Karl Khan, something they wouldn't play against the first knight f3 move. Just something to think about. In this position, following the move castling kingside, because black went with the French defense against e4, this bishop on c8 is no longer pinning our knight on f3, so we can simply play a move like rook e1. Queen e1 is no longer necessary, and really, guys, in this position, I think black's only real option is pushing on the queen side of the board. With a move like b5, I mean, black can't attack us on the king side of the board because we simply have so much firepower, and our center is very strong from c2 going all the way down to e4. I mean, this is really an indestructible system for white. So here black's best chance is pushing on the queen side of the board, and now as white, we really have two different game plans of attack. I'm going to show you both so that you can choose what you like the most to play in your own games. The most popular option is e5, and e takes d5 is also a potential option. Let's first go over the most popular line of e5. I mean, by doing this, we really do gain space in the center of the board and attack the dark squares on f6 and d6. Now in this position, we need to play the move knight f1 so that we can meet a move like queen c7, attacking that pawn with bishop f4. And now if a move like a5, I mean, black just hurling their pawns down the queen side of the board, we're going to continue attacking on the king side of the board with h4. If a move like b4, we have bishop f4 continuing to really solidify that central pawn. And now the next two moves, we have the key idea of bringing this knight all the way to g4. I mean, if you look at white's pieces, most of our pieces are pretty solid here, but the knight on f1 isn't doing a ton. Let's get this piece involved against the attack on the opponent's king. Let's play knight 1 h2, and against a move like a4, play knight g4. With this knight, we're attacking both f6, h6, and again, defending that e5 pawn. If a move like c4, black attacking on the queen side, that's okay. We'll simply take that pawn off the board. And now in this position, we can play the move h5, continuing to attack and take space on the king side of the board. We've already gone this far. Why stop now? Really, by playing the move h5, we want to play h6, forcing the move g6, which would really weaken the dark squares on the king side of the board. So you may see the move h6, but after this, we're really going to gang up on this pawn with queen d2, using our queen and two of our minor pieces, looking to eventually take that pawn, probably with the bishop on f4. And here, if a move like rook c8, we could take the pawn right away, but I think slightly better is the move b3. In this position, guys, there's no rush in taking this pawn. Let's slightly slow down black's attacking chances on the queen side of the board, force that bishop back to b5, and then take the pawn on h6. I mean, here the whole idea is that after g takes h6, we can take back with the queen. And yes, guys, we did give up a piece and only get 2 pawns in return. But if you just look at this position, this is extremely uncomfortable for black. I mean, the black king can't even move, and there's no easy way to kick this queen out. I mean, if black does play a move like rook e8, we're just going to play rook d1, and if bishop f8, trying to get more pieces involved, trying to kick our queen out, we're just going to bring it back to f4, still keeping this queen as a very strong and aggressive attacking piece. We have a ton of attacking ideas on the way. I mean, this knight f3 to g5 idea will probably come soon, attacking f7 with both the knight and the queen. Our knight on g4 attacks both f6 and h6. h6 and h7 ideas are always possible. This king is very vulnerable, and it's really hard for black to even move here. I mean, this knight on d7 can't move because of knight f6. Knight g5 ideas are always coming in. If a move like bishop g7 right now, we just play h6, kicking that bishop back to a square like h8, in which case we can now play h7 check. If the king takes, the whole idea is that we have knight g5 with check, and if king f8, we can actually play the crazy looking move of rook takes d5. I'm just showing you this variation just to show you the potential of white's attacking chances. Here the whole idea is that following e takes d5, we have a forced mate in 3 with queen h6 check, and because we took on d5, that d6 square is open. We're going to play h8 equals either queen or rook, and after king e7, play queen d6. We have ourselves a game over. So guys, going back to this position, that really does cover the aggressive and dangerous line of e5. After e5, we're going to look to play knight f1, bishop f4, and then play h4, knight h2, and knight g4. Continue to push our pawn. A very straightforward plan that is pretty much unstoppable. But what if you want a more quiet and strategic option here? I recommend the move e takes d5. And by the way, this is completely okay, much less aggressive, but still a very solid game plan. Here the whole idea is that following e takes d5, black's pawn structure, b5, c5, d5, is very overextended. Let's try to undermine it and play the move a4. Now if b takes a4, we'll simply take back with the rook, and if a6, we simply take that b5 pawn, and if a takes b5, thank you for the rook on a8. So following a move like b4, it may seem as if black is simply crushing on the queen side of the board, but now as white, we have the key idea of d4, fighting for the center of the board. And I know some of you are probably wondering, wait a second, black has 2 attacking pieces, and we only have 1 defender. I mean, what happens if a move like c takes d4 is played? Well, in this case, we're simply going to continue with knight b3. Both of our knights on b3 and f3 are attacking that pawn on d4 as well as our queen, and there's simply no way for black to hold on to it. I mean, if a move like bishop g4 pinning our knight to our queen on d1, we can play the move queen d3, and the very next move, take back with our b knight. I really do like this position for white. Black's pawn structure is advanced and overexposed, and we ourselves really have no weaknesses. We have a strong centralized knight right in the center of the board, a strong knight on f3 supporting it, a queen on d3, which is a very strong piece, a rook on e1, that is a very active piece. Our bishop on g2 indirectly puts pressure on that central isolated pawn, and this dark squared bishop on d2 has a ton of different options. We're soon going to swing our a rook to d1, and I like white's game. Now I do want to mention that going back to this main d4 idea from white, black doesn't need to take it. If black doesn't take it and just plays a quiet move like a5, we'll simply take the pawn on c5 and then play a move like knight b3. And if black plays a move like c4, I mean, this may look very tempting because it does give black a ton of space on the queen side of the board. We now have the key idea of knight e5. The whole idea here is that if knight takes e5, we're going to take back with our d pawn followed by knight takes c4. And if knight takes d4, we're going to take that pawn on c4 right away. Some of you may be wondering, wait, how on earth are we taking this pawn? Well, if d takes e4, thank you for the rook on a8. This is nearly losing for black. We have 2 strong centralized knight, a bishop on g4 clamping down on that d5 pawn, and indirectly the rook on a8, a solid rook on e1, and again, this bishop has a ton of different ideas. We're going to continue to develop. Let's say bishop e3, bishop f4, queen d2, bring our rook into the action. I like white's game here, and this is a very hard position to play with the black pieces. If you'd like to learn more on the theory behind the Queen's Gambit, click the video to the left. If you'd like to learn more about the Vienna game, click the video to the right. Leave a comment to let me know what other videos you'd like to see covered on this channel. And as always, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.